Hello, everyone. So, the case I'm going to be talking about today is the case of Anitra, Washington. It is a survivor story. I had a great time doing the case on Lachelle Nance, which is another survival story. Well, I want to say a great time because what happened to her was awful. But I love doing cases where there is a survivor. And in this case, this woman is a survivor of the Grim Sleeper. And she is the only known survivor, so there could possibly be more, but as far as we know, she is the only one. And it's gonna be probably a longer video because I have a lot of information on this case. I feel like the Grim Sleeper is a fairly well-known serial killer, and so there's a lot of stuff. there's a lot. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So all the links that I used for research will be down below, like always. There will also be a link to a case suggestions form if there's anything you'd like me to talk about. And let's go ahead and get into this. So, on the night of November 19th, 1988, Anitra would cross paths with the Grim Sleeper serial killer. She was 27 at the time, a mom of two, and a resident of South Los Angeles. That night, she walked a familiar route to her friend Linda's house before they were going to go to a party together that evening. While walking, she spotted an orange Pinto with a white racing stripe parked on the side of the street. She did not realize that she was going to be Lonnie Franklin Jr.'s 8th murder victim. And he watched her walk down the street, and that her testimony of this night was going to be critical to getting one of the most prolific serial killers off the streets. She had no idea what this night was going to do in the future, and that she was going to help get somebody locked up for the horrible crimes that they committed. So, he was watching her, and she says that she stopped to admire the vehicle when Lonnie noticed her. He noticed her, even though he was watching her, and he hollered something. And this is a quote from Anitra. She says, "I kept walking, and he hollered again. And then I turned around and said, I know you're not hollering at me, because if you're going to talk to me, you have to come where I am." End quote. Anitra says Lonnie then pulled up to her, and that he was a black man in his early 30s, in a black polo shirt and khakis, and Anitra says that he seemed non-threatening. He asked where she was headed, and she answered him truthfully, like she was going to her friend's house. Well, Lonnie offered her a ride, which she did decline. Then he threw a line at her that changed her mind, and he said, "That's what's wrong with you black women. People can't be nice to you." End quote. Anitra says after hearing this, she felt sorry for him and agreed to have him drive her to her friend's house. Once in the car, Anitra says they had a pleasant conversation, and she had no suspicions about anything, and that nothing seemed amiss. That was until he told her he had to make a quick stop. Lonnie said he had to stop at his uncle's house to pick up some money, and then they'd be back on their way. He drove them to a residential area, and he entered a nearby home, and when he would return to the car, his demeanor had changed. He had become agitated and angry, and he accused her of dogging him or disrespecting him, and then called her by another woman's name. Confused, she turned to face him, and then that's when everything went silent. Without warning, he had shot her in the chest with a .25 caliber gun. Anitra says in the moments after she'd been shot, she never heard the gunshot. All she heard was silence. And this is another quote from her. She says, "He shot me point blank in my chest, but I didn't realize I'd been shot. I didn't hear no gun, and I didn't see blood, but I know something was really wrong." End quote. Instinctively, she reached for the door handle to escape, but he said, "Bitch, I'll shoot you again." In shock, she realized what happened and began pleading with him to let her out of the vehicle. I was like, "Please just let me out of your car, because if I do die, I'm gonna ask the Lord, let me haunt you for the rest of your life, so that you know that you couldn't get away with this." He continued driving, and she felt herself losing consciousness. She said she started to feel woozy and getting weak, and kept fading in and out, and then suddenly passed out. When she woke hours later, she was still in his car, but it was dark outside. She felt pressure on her chest and tried to push it off. And she says, "And then I heard this laugh. He was on top of me doing something. I started fighting, but it was like I was paralyzed. And then I let out this long scream. I knew I was gonna die." She would pass out again and woke later to flashing lights and realized he was taking Polaroids of her. Anitra says that she was weak, slumped against the seat, and he started driving again. She was feeling on the door, hoping to find the door handle. She managed to open the car door as he was driving, and he pushed her out onto the street. She was scared he might drive back, so she rolled to the curb, got up, and saw the blood. She dragged herself to the sidewalk and began walking to find help and kept walking until she found street signs she recognized, and she knew she wasn't that far from Linda's house. In shock and bleeding, she stumbled to her friend's home and pounded on the front door, but no one answered because Linda had already left to go to that party. So she lay down on the porch and waited for Linda. Sometime in the night, Linda did come home and she would call an ambulance for her friend. Enietra was rushed to Harbor UCLA Medical Center. The single bullet had collapsed one of her lungs and she would spend 3 weeks in the hospital. Despite the point-blank shot, her ribs and sternum deflected the bullet and missed her internal organs entirely. While recovering, she learned Lonnie had sexually assaulted her that night. A couple days after the attack, detectives from the LAPD visited her. She gave a statement and described Lonnie's appearance to a sketch artist. LAPD tried to say that she was a sex worker and that's why she got in the car. And she would fight against that allegation. This allegation really upset her. And the thing is, even if she had been a sex worker, it's still not a reason to get shot. So it was an incredibly nasty move by LAPD, in my opinion, to make that kind of assumption against her. After the bullet was removed, police linked it to a .25 caliber gun that had been used in other cold cases in South LA. The LAPD knew that they were dealing with a serial killer, but they kept the information secret from her and the public and refused to even acknowledge a serial killer was targeting black women until 2008. For 20 years, they kept that a secret. Because of this, because they decided not to tell the public, they didn't acknowledge that there was a serial killer, they didn't acknowledge that these black women are being murdered, this allowed Lonnie to continue to kill for decades. He was not caught, obviously, for that amount of time, and so for 20 years, he was able to continue doing what he had been doing because they didn't tell anybody. Lonnie's first murder was 29-year-old Deborah Jackson, and she was killed in 1985. When he crossed paths with Anitra, 7 women had already been killed. Neither police or local media paid much attention to the murders of black women, despite the growing body count of women being found killed by the same weapon. These cases became cold cases, and LAPD failed to form a task force to investigate and made little effort to find the killer at all. Every single one of Lonnie's victims were killed with the same .25 caliber gun, all shot in the chest, bodies discovered in South LA neighborhoods. All victims were young black women. So it's very obvious that there is a pattern here, and instead of doing their job to find a killer, they keep it hush hush, allowing this man to go free, to continue doing what he's doing. And it's because they're obviously it's a race thing. They're racist. The LAPD is fucking disgusting for this move. That should not have been kept under wraps for 20 years. I was appalled going into this and learning more about it because there's just no reason for it. It's disgusting. So 13 years after her attack, LAPD started sifting through a massive backlog of unsolved murders from the 80s and the 90s. Over the next few years, they began to connect the evidence of the same weapon. In 2006, Anitra was approached by 2 LAPD detectives, and she finally learned the truth that her attacker was a serial killer. So this was in 2006, so 18 years after her near-death experience, she finally learns that she was almost a victim of a serial killer. 18 years later. Later that same year, LAPD connected his DNA to two LA murders committed in 2002 and 2003. He was still killing, but LAPD still refused to inform the public of this. He's still killing almost 20 years later, and they still refuse to do anything. I have no words. I'm speechless. That is disgusting on every level. In 2007, LAPD quietly formed a task force to find Lonnie, but they failed to, inform families of the victims that their loved ones had died at the hands of a serial killer. They still did not tell the families of these victims. You have to be kidding me. So the task force, called 800 Task Force, remained secret. In 2007, Lonnie claimed another victim, 25-year-old Janisha Peters, and journalists from LA, they started to learn of the task force. And in the winter of 2007, they would break the story that a serial killer in South LA had been active since the 1980s and confirmed LAPD failed to inform the public and still had no suspects. The newspaper dubbed Lonnie as the Grim Sleeper. Families of his victims learned their loved ones were killed by a serial killer through that news article. And this article was from LA Weekly. That is the paper company or the newspaper company that finally broke the story. And they are the reason, not the police, they are the reason why anybody even started to learn about this. September 2008, LAPD finally acknowledges that there was a serial killer and offered $500,000 in a reward for information that caught him. In February 2009, the LAPD Chief William Bratton spoke publicly about the killer for the first time. By 2009, they still had no suspects, but when Lonnie's 28-year-old son, Christopher, was convicted of a weapons charge, they discovered a familial match from his son's DNA to evidence from past crime scenes. They focused on Lonnie as a suspect, finally, went undercover and collected his DNA from utensils he used at a pizza restaurant, which matched the DNA found at the crime scenes. July 7th of 2010, Lonnie was finally arrested and charged in the murders of 9 women and 1 teen girl. He was also charged in attempted killing of Anitra. At his home, they uncovered more than 1,000 photos of mostly black women dating back to the 1980s. There were also videos as well. Many other Polaroids of women they are alarming. The women appeared unconscious or dead. After his arrest, they paid Anitra a visit and bought a Polaroid for her to examine, and it was of her 27-year-old self of 20 years ago, on the night of her attack. Lonnie was charged with 10 murders spanning from 1985 to 2007. It's believed he may have killed at least half a dozen other women, but police did not have enough evidence to charge him, and many of his suspected victims' bodies have never been found. 6 years after his arrest, his trial would finally begin on February 16th, 2016, so really not that long ago. And Anitra, his only confirmed survivor, would take the stand to testify against him. And what I have for you, what I'm going to say next, is a very big paragraph, and it's her words, Anitra's words to Lonnie while she was on the stand. And she says, quote, "My name is Anitra Margette Washington, and I am one of your little pickups. I really think you are truly a piece of evil. You're right up there with Manson. The hurting part about it is that you did it on your own. You put my life in fear of people. And sorry, let me say that again. The hurting part about it is that you did it on your own. You put my life in fear of people I should be proud of. It has to be hate. hate for women, your own kind, I don't have no closure because I'm still living. It's a good thing. I pray to God. I thank you every day for it. But because you blackmailed me, being a black woman, knowing that I'm supposed to give you respect, and you took it away. So how am I supposed to give that to someone else? So now you got that yourself. How's your family supposed to give it to you? End quote. I'm sorry if I was messing up. I have it my notes. I have it written down, and I don't have the best handwriting. I'm so sorry. But basically, he had demanded respect from her, but he's not someone to be respected. So how can his family respect him? And basically, she has this fear now of even people that she should be proud of. And that has to be a traumatizing thing. And yeah, she's still alive. She still has her life. That's amazing. But for 20 years, she had no closure. So that's basically what I'm getting from this. On May 5th, 2016, he was found guilty on all counts and he was sentenced to death. In March of 2020, he died on death row at San Quentin Prison. And we're going to end this video with a quote from Anitra, and this quote is from 2022. And she says, I finally settled down and I was able to do things and live life. I really don't consider myself a survivor because a survivor survives day to day. I am going further. I am a conqueror. And I think that is absolutely amazing. She's absolutely a conqueror. I cannot imagine what she went through in any capacity, the pain, being shot, being so close to losing her life, being assaulted, and she didn't just lay in the street and allow herself to bleed out and die. She, while being shot in a lot of pain, got herself up, walked until she found her friend's house, and then just laid there until her friend came home. It's it's incredible that she was definitely making sure she survived. She kept saying, I'm gonna die, but she was doing everything to make sure that that didn't happen, and I think that's absolutely amazing. I cannot imagine just being shot and then just picking yourself up and getting help. And then, you know, being in the hospital for weeks and then being visited by police and then having this accusation brought against you that, well, you got in his car because you're a sex worker, when that's not the case. And even if she was a sex worker, it's not like she deserved to be killed or attempted to be killed for it. And then goes 20 years not realizing that she was the almost victim of a serial killer. And then being able to stand at his trial and say stuff to him that I'm sure she's wanted to say her entire life or the entire 20 years. I'm sure she had a lot of pent up anger and fear and sadness, and she finally, to an extent, got to let that out when she took that stand. And I hope that now she's feeling some sort of peace. It seems like it. Saying, I've settled down, I'm starting to live life, I'm going further. I really hope that she continues her healing and that she can have an amazing life from here on out. And you know what? Fuck Lonnie. Fuck him. He didn't take her life, and I think that is absolutely amazing. Hopefully, the bodies of the victims that were never found are eventually found, and they can also be put to rest as well. But that is all I have for you guys today about Anitra Washington, the lone survivor of the Grim Sleeper. Let me know your thoughts down below, like always. Anitra, if you come across this video, I hope I did your story justice. I think you are an incredible person. You went through a lot, and you are absolutely a conqueror, and I hope you keep that light for the rest of your life. But thank you guys so much for listening to Anitra's story, and I will see you guys very, very soon. Bye, guys.